At a team meeting, my manager Rachel humiliated me in front of everyone saying, "You're an unqualified mess. Who let you run meetings unsupervised?" I walked straight into my boss's office and shut the door behind me. "I can't do this anymore," I said, not even sitting down. My hands were still shaking from what had just happened in that conference room, half the floor staring at me, while Rachel tore me apart like I was some incompetent intern instead of someone with a decade of project management experience and an MBA from Northwestern. Brian looked at me for a long moment, then sighed heavily. "You're not the first person to say that," he admitted quietly. "She's lost 4 people in 6 months. I was hoping it would work out better this time." That was 3 weeks into my new job at Everent Tech, and Rachel's mask was already slipping. After my husband and I were both laid off last year, I'd been desperate for a fresh start. The role was technically a step down from my previous position as senior operations manager at a Fortune 500 consulting firm, but we had bills to pay and a mortgage that didn't care about my pride. We were still recovering from the $47,000 in medical bills after my father-in-law passed from cancer. Officially, I was hired as a project liaison between Brian's strategy group and Rachel's product division, earning $78,000 annually. Unofficially, I was Rachel's personal punching bag. That became clear within days when she started emailing me at 9 p.m. on Sundays with demands like, "Lisa, I want that report on my desk first thing tomorrow, no excuses." She'd call me at 7 a.m. on weekends, ask me to cancel approved time off, skip lunch breaks, and rewrite my documents to match her condescending tone. But the worst part wasn't the workload, it was her constant cutting remarks. "You really should consider dressing for your body type," she'd say during team calls. "You're pretty sharp for someone without a technical degree." Then there was her favorite. "Brian must have hired you out of pity." I tried pushing back professionally, calmly. That only provoked her more. Every ounce of assertiveness on my part was met with a fresh storm of passive aggression or outright public humiliation. I stayed because I had to. Our savings account had $3,200 left, and my husband's new job at a local startup barely covered half our monthly expenses of $4,800. The breaking point came during what should have been a routine team sync. I'd scheduled a follow-up meeting and hadn't included one of Rachel's junior analysts simply because I didn't know the guy existed. He'd started 2 days earlier and wasn't on any org chart I'd seen. That oversight gave Rachel the opening she'd been waiting for. She stormed into the open office, her voice sharp and loud enough for everyone to hear. "Do you even know what you're doing, Lisa? Who let you run meetings unsupervised? Honestly, you're an unqualified mess." The entire floor went silent. I could feel 30 pairs of eyes on me, watching my humiliation play out in real time. That's when something clicked in my mind, not anger, but calculation. Rachel had just made a critical error. She'd humiliated me publicly in front of witnesses, using language that violated every HR policy in the book. Brian didn't hesitate after I explained what had been happening. By that evening, I was reassigned to his team, officially out from under Rachel's supervision. I felt like I could breathe again, finally. But freedom from Rachel's direct authority didn't mean freedom from Rachel. The following Monday, I received an email with the subject line, "Urgent," containing the same bullet points and demands as if nothing had changed. When I didn't respond, she showed up at my desk. "So you're ignoring me now," she hissed, loud enough for my new team to hear. "Is that how you operate? Play the victim, then pretend you're too good for the job?" Before I could respond, Brian appeared behind her. "Rachel, that's enough." She turned pale, but the damage was done. She kept emailing, kept circling like a shark that didn't know the meal was over. The tension followed me everywhere. I couldn't focus on my work, couldn't sleep properly, couldn't escape the feeling that she was just waiting for another opportunity to strike. 2 weeks later, I made a strategic decision that would change everything. I opened a blank document and typed my resignation letter, simple, direct, professional. But I didn't stop there. I attached a second file. a meticulously detailed 3-page document listing every inappropriate comment, every after-hours demand, every documented case of verbal harassment I could recall, complete with dates, times, witnesses, and direct quotes. Then I hit send, not just to Brian, but to HR, to leadership, and to Rachel's director. The responses rolled in fast, some shocked, some supportive, some conspicuously silent. Rachel stayed. I left. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't really gone. I had already set something in motion that she wouldn't see coming until it was far too late. The first morning after leaving Everent Tech, I sat at my kitchen table in my robe, staring at a half-empty cup of coffee. My inbox was quiet. No late-night tasks, no urgent subject lines, no Rachel. It felt surreal, but peace has a funny way of turning into panic when there's no paycheck behind it. We had maybe 2 months of expenses covered if we cut everything extra. My husband had started his new position at a tech startup, but his $45,000 salary barely covered our basics. I spent the next 2 weeks submitting 5 applications daily, tailoring every resume, rewriting every cover letter. Nothing. Then LinkedIn changed everything. A notification popped up. David Montgomery has joined Everent Tech as Chief Strategy Officer. David Montgomery, the same David I'd worked with 5 years ago at Strategic Solutions. He'd pulled me into a high-visibility project that led to my first major promotion and a $15,000 raise. We'd stayed loosely connected through social media. Without overthinking it, I sent him a message. "Congrats, David. Hope Everent treats you well. Let me know if you want any insights. I used to be there recently." 20 minutes later, my phone rang. "Lisa, hey, wow, it's been, 4 years?" "Closer to 5, I laughed, though it felt like a lifetime. We chatted for 20 minutes. I kept it light but honest, explaining that I'd been there recently, that the culture had some serious issues, that certain leaders, without naming names, had caused significant turnover and morale problems. David asked thoughtful questions. I offered specific insights. How Everent could modernize their project management systems, reduce redundancy between strategy and product teams, eliminate the communication bottlenecks that were costing them an estimated $200,000 quarterly in delayed deliverables. At the end of the call, David paused. "You know, I was going to hire a chief of staff, someone who can help me rebuild from the inside. I wasn't sure where to start looking, but would you consider coming back?" I sat in stunned silence. "Back to Everent?" "Under me. You'd report directly to me as Director of Strategic Operations. I'd make sure your title and compensation match your experience. We're talking $125,000 base plus equity. And let's be clear, you'd be 2 levels above whoever made your life difficult. I want you helping drive culture change, not surviving it." The offer letter arrived the next afternoon. Director of Strategic Operations, reporting directly to the CSO. Salary nearly double what I'd been making, full remote flexibility, equity package, bonus potential tied to measurable culture improvement metrics. I accepted immediately. 3 weeks after walking out of Everent Tech with a cardboard box and a scathing resignation letter, I walked back in through the front doors of the executive wing. David and I agreed to keep my return under wraps until the next all-hands strategy meeting, giving me time to settle in, review internal documents, and reconnect with former colleagues who were still at the company. What I discovered in those documents was staggering. Everent Tech had been bleeding talent for months. Employee satisfaction scores had dropped 34% in the past year. Turnover in Rachel's division was running at 67% annually, nearly triple the industry average. The cost of constantly recruiting and training replacements was approximately $890,000 yearly, not including lost productivity and project delays. Rachel's name appeared repeatedly in exit interviews, buried in corporate speak. Leadership misalignment, lack of psychological safety, unclear direction with punitive edge. In plain language, she was toxic, and everyone knew it. The day of the announcement arrived. I stood near the back of the large conference room as David took the stage. "Before we dive into strategy updates," he said with a grin, "I'm excited to introduce someone who's going to help us reshape how we think, operate, and lead." I watched heads turn as people scanned the room. "Lisa Grant is joining us as our new Director of Strategic Operations. Some of you may remember her." The silence was thick. From across the room, I watched Rachel's expression shift from confusion to disbelief to something sharp and dangerous. She recognized the name first, then she saw me. Her face dropped. She blinked twice, then quickly looked away. I stood tall, calm, completely in control. What Rachel didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have anticipated, was that this wasn't just a return. It was the beginning of her systematic downfall. The next few days were surprisingly smooth. David brought me into senior leadership meetings where I reviewed organizational charts, process breakdowns, and internal communication workflows. Every document confirmed my suspicions. Everent was hemorrhaging talent and money because of toxic leadership that nobody had been willing to address. But Rachel couldn't help herself. 3 days after the announcement, she sent David an email, a long one. I only knew because he called me into his office and tilted his screen so I could read it. "I'm concerned about Lisa's presence here. She used to work for me and there were issues. She attempted to undermine my authority and left the company on difficult terms. I'm not sure she's suited for a director-level role. Just wanted to raise the concern privately." David raised an eyebrow as I finished reading. "I assume this isn't the full story?" "Not even close," I said evenly. "I thought so." He opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. Inside was my resignation letter from 3 months earlier, the one I'd sent to HR, leadership, and Rachel's own director. Attached were pages of documented harassment, complete with dates, timestamps, and direct quotes. "She forgot we keep digital records," David said simply. I shook my head. "She didn't forget. She just didn't think it would matter." "Well," he said, "it does." Rachel escalated the following Friday, sending another email, this time to David and the chief people officer. "I believe Lisa is using her new position to target me. I've heard from others that she's speaking negatively about me. I'm requesting an investigation into her behavior." It was almost laughable. I'd barely spoken to anyone outside my immediate team. David forwarded it to me with a single line. "You don't need to reply. HR is already familiar with the context." A week later, during a senior leadership roundtable discussing cross-functional delays in the product pipeline, Rachel made her fatal mistake. We were addressing collaboration issues between her team and ours, delays that had cost the company an estimated $180,000 in the previous quarter. I explained the gap tactfully but clearly. Rachel interrupted me mid-sentence. "Maybe you're just not used to managing this level of complexity, Lisa. It's very different from administrative work." The air in the room went still. She'd just implied, in front of 4 VPs, that I wasn't qualified to be at the table, and she did it with that same condescending smile I remembered so well. I didn't flinch. Instead, I leaned forward, met her gaze directly, and said, "I agree, Rachel. Managing complexity requires collaboration. That's why I've spent the last week interviewing your former staff. None of them felt they could speak up when they were under your management. I'd be happy to share the anonymized insights with you." Her smile vanished instantly. David spoke next. "That would be helpful, Lisa. Please compile those findings into a report and send it my way. Rachel, we'll schedule a follow-up meeting to go over next steps." Rachel didn't respond. Her posture stiffened, hands clasped tightly in her lap. The meeting moved on, but the tone had shifted completely. She'd tried to cut me down and exposed her own leadership failures instead. Later that day, David called me into his office. "Off the record," he said. "Do you think Rachel is still the right fit for this organization?" I chose my words carefully. "I think she was given every chance to change and chose not to. What happens next is up to leadership. But if you're asking whether she's a culture risk, yes, she absolutely is." David nodded. "That's what I thought." He didn't say more, but the look in his eyes told me everything. Rachel's time was running out. Over the following weeks, I focused on my strategic alignment project, which had expanded into a comprehensive cross-departmental overhaul. I met with team leads from engineering, data analytics, marketing, and operations. Everywhere I went, I heard the same story. People had been afraid to speak up about systemic problems. Stories emerged about missed promotions, demeaning language in meetings, late-night phone calls that bordered on harassment, mental health leaves, and quiet resignations. Almost every trail led back to Rachel's influence, either directly or through the culture of fear she'd cultivated. I documented everything methodically, not for revenge, but for accountability. Every complaint, every pattern of retaliation, every time Rachel had inserted herself into someone else's workflow to undermine their authority. David encouraged this quietly, never saying, "Build a case," but making it clear that thorough documentation served everyone's interests. Then one morning, it all came to a head. David forwarded me an email with the subject line, "Concerns regarding Lisa Grant." From Rachel, naturally. This time she'd gone completely unhinged. The message was 4 paragraphs of accusations. I was trying to sabotage her, using my position to poison perceptions, obsessed with discrediting her, trying to get her fired since day one. David's note was brief. "Thought you'd want to see this. I've already forwarded to HR." Below that was another message from the Chief People Officer. "Thanks, David. We've seen a pattern. 5 complaints in the past year, all similar in tone. We'll move forward with formal review." 5 complaints. I sat back, processing this. Rachel had been systematically targeting people for over a year, and HR had been quietly building a case. 2 days later, the quarterly company newsletter featured a short profile. Lisa Grant, our new Director of Strategic Operations, brings over a decade of cross-functional leadership to Everent Tech. A returning face to the company, Lisa is known for her commitment to integrity, inclusivity, and operational excellence. I didn't write it, didn't even know it was coming, but it set Rachel off completely. That afternoon, David sent me a message with an attachment, another email Rachel had sent to the CEO this time. "Lisa is manipulating internal communications. She doesn't deserve a leadership spotlight. She has no technical background and was previously managed out of her role. I'm concerned about the message this sends." The CEO didn't respond to Rachel, but HR did. 2 days later, Rachel was placed on administrative leave. They didn't specify why, but she knew. The day after she was escorted out, I found a sticky note on my office door in shaky handwriting. "I hope this was worth it." No signature, just spite. A week later, David called me in for a final update. He slid a printed document across his desk, the formal summary of HR's investigation, dozens of employee interviews, written statements, evidence logs, and Rachel's name at the center of it all. "She's not coming back," David said calmly. "We've decided to terminate her contract, effective immediately." The investigation had revealed even more than I'd suspected. Rachel had been secretly recording private team meetings without consent. She'd deleted project files out of spite when reassigned from key initiatives. Worst of all, she'd actively tried to sabotage my onboarding process, sending emails asking leadership to reconsider highlighting me in company communications because I wasn't respected by the team and had a history of insubordination. She underestimated how many people were ready to speak up this time, David explained. Her entire former team provided written statements. And your resignation letter? It's being used as a training case in HR now, an example of how to properly document workplace harassment. That evening, I sat in my real office, the one with glass walls and a skyline view, and reflected on the past few months. Rachel was gone, terminated for cause. Her reputation in the industry effectively destroyed. Her LinkedIn profile, I'd noticed, now listed her as seeking new opportunities, with her last position conveniently ending several months earlier than her actual termination date. Meanwhile, my strategic initiatives were already showing measurable results. Employee satisfaction scores had increased 22% in my division. Turnover had dropped to 18% company-wide. We'd recovered the lost productivity that Rachel's management style had cost us, saving an estimated $400,000 annually just in recruitment and training costs. 6 months later, Everent Tech announced a new company-wide policy on workplace culture, developed in collaboration with HR in my office. It included stronger reporting procedures, anonymous feedback tools, and leadership accountability tracking, tied directly to compensation reviews. The company also introduced a quarterly workshop titled The Cost of Silence: How to Spot and Stop Toxic Leadership. They asked me to help design the curriculum. A year after my return, I received a letter from a candidate applying to join my team. At the bottom of her cover letter, she'd written, "I read about your story at last year's Women in Leadership Summit. It changed the way I advocate for myself. Thank you." Rachel had tried to destroy my career, my confidence, and my financial stability. Instead, she'd given me the opportunity to build something better, not just for myself, but for every employee who'd ever been told they were unqualified by someone who confused cruelty with leadership. Today, I earn $142,000 annually with equity that's already valued at over $200,000. Rachel, according to industry contacts, has struggled to find employment at her previous level, with several potential employers citing cultural fit concerns after reference checks. Her attempt to sue the company for wrongful termination was quickly dismissed when her own emails and recorded statements were presented as evidence. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just success, it's becoming the person who ensures others never have to endure what you survived.